This is Infection. Welcome into another episode 425, recorded here live on Tuesday, March the 7th, 2023. My name is Nick Craig. You can check me out on Twitter at Nicholas M. Craig or visit our website, infectionpodcast.com. Can't do this thing alone. Joining us with, what kind of computer are we looking at there behind you?
It's an Amiga.
Oh, it's an Amiga. I was going to say Amiga, but I don't want to look like an uncultured idiot. So, what kind of game we got running on this said Amiga behind you?
I don't. It says Cannon Fodder to the right, but I don't know if that's the actual game. Probably is. Looks like Cannon Fodder. Somebody's a really big fan of Cannon Fodder.
There you go.
But hey, if you want to find me, of course, you can find me at Boise Computer on Twitter or Brian Eldridge on Gab, Parler, Getter, Truth Social, and all the other places. So, one thing, Nick, we've been covering this Microsoft news here for a while, and
we have.
The whole acquisition. This has been something that's been happening for, been a year and a half? When did this Microsoft?
It happened in June? June of last year, maybe? Something like that.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to remember.
Because
it seems like it's been a long time.
Didn't they have like 16 months to close? Like, don't they have through the end of this year to get the deal done? Something like that. It was middle of last year, I think.
Yes, because there is a point where it's going to, but January of 22 was there was an announcement from Microsoft to acquire Activision Blizzard.
Okay,
and that was in January 18th. So we're over a year.
A year. Now, I was close on the J's.
That it's been, but yeah. But it just passed a year because it was the very beginning. They proposed it in January of last year. So. This has been going through, of course. Now we're looking at trying to get it approved in the EU.
Oh, yes.
There's been all kinds of things going back and forth, and it seems like it all comes down to money, right? And supposedly they've cleared some hurdles. I don't know that they expected to be larger, and so it looked like it might actually happen. Because initially, when EU started really pushing back and Sony started saying, no, this is unfair, it kind of seemed like that it wasn't going to be, there's possibly that it wasn't going to happen. Like I actually came to some thoughts in my head that I hadn't had up until that point of we might not actually see this merger happen, and that's going to be a mess to unwind.
Yeah, I never had a doubt that it could get through the United States. If Microsoft couldn't get it through the FTC, they could just pay off the politicians to get it done. So that was never a problem. But some of these other foreign organizations, I don't really know exactly what their makeup and setup is. But listen to this. According to the Reuters article, Brian, which, by the way, the acronym for this is going to be AKB, Activision. I don't know what that's how I don't know what the K stands for. But according to Reuters, thanks to their extensive offerings and licensing deals that the company offered and made to its rivals. This was that 10-year, we're not going to touch Call of Duty. Yes.
Sony, they made these promises that they would offer these to them. Now, of course, Sony kept on ignoring, acting like they weren't getting any of these phone calls. And, I wonder if that's going to not work out for them. Because if they didn't accept it prior to the deal going through, makes you wonder if there's no contract signed, are they going to be held to holding anything? I mean, maybe they'll just have to hold it with the Nintendo. Of course, Microsoft has really changed, I think, in the last 5 years to where they're realizing that there's money, and money is what matters. One thing that I don't know if you saw this, but in this whole filings thing, PlayStation may have to give some information up that they weren't wanting to give up. That's going to make Sony not look so good when it comes to their exclusivity deals that they're doing. Also, how much they're paying for games and just their companies to not be on the Game Pass. These are all things that now, in all of these findings, they may have to give this information to prove that, hey, these guys they're actually doing the anti-competitive or not being super friendly, when Microsoft's saying, hey, we'll give you access to all our stuff. And look, we don't have very many exclusives, and look how many exclusives they actually have, and they'll have to give an account to the commission of all of the exclusives they actually have.
Interesting to note, not only Nintendo agreed to the 10-year licensing deal, which folks are being like, oh my God, it means the new Call of Duty. And it's like, no, not necessarily, but it gives Nintendo the option in the next 10 years, which, by the way, it will be longer than 10 years. But this is just a blanket carte blanche, 10 years, no questions asked. But also, NVIDIA is on board on this for their GeForce Now, I think is the name of that streaming service. So both of those companies have said, yeah, this is perfect. We're on board with this. No issues here at all. As you mentioned, Sony was, according to Microsoft, and I have no reason. I know I'm a Microsoft fanboy. I'm not going to sit here and argue that. I'm not going to argue that point with you. What I will argue is that I have no reason not to believe Microsoft at this point. They've done nothing that, at least that I've seen thus far, they've done nothing to indicate that they're not trustworthy or that they deserve not to be trusted. Everything that they've said is everything. I have no reason to distrust anything that they're saying. And they have claimed that Sony will not even answer the phone. That they will not even, high ups at Sony will not even respond to emails or phone calls or text messages, anything to discuss this deal. And because Sony was trying to use this as the holdout for them being able to block this deal, because this is a huge, it's weird. I was just about to say it's a huge blow to Sony. But as I think about it more and more, Brian, I don't think I actually mean that, because I don't think it's going to be a huge blow to anybody. I don't think there's any, as you just mentioned, I don't think Microsoft has the appetite to just rip out the rug under every other game developer and make every game available on the Xbox. Now, will there be exclusives of new IPs? Probably, but that's no different than a first-party studio. So this, I'm 100% on board with you. I'm shocked that this was able to, it seems like, it hasn't done it yet, but it seems like the EU's antitrust approval is going to be kind of a cakewalk because they've made these deals. There's also, so there's the EU, which is the tough one. Then there's whatever the UK regulating body is. And then there's the FTC, the Federal Trade Commission.
And the FTC, that's the one that's going to possibly bring around the issues for Sony, because the FTC is suing Microsoft to try to prevent this. Yes. So that's where the discovery process comes in. And that's where they have made it to where Sony has to disclose its exclusivity deals for every deal that they have made after January 1st of 2019. So all the it includes fees or agreements that prevented publishers from placing games on the Xbox Game Pass. Because the judge, they made this decision because Microsoft accused Sony of paying for blocking rights, as they called it.
Sure.
Stop developers from adding their content to Game Pass. And so that's going to be happening. And also they're going to have to give a full list of all the exclusives and the amounts they paid. And I think that's going to really not look good for Sony when those numbers come out. And especially if Sony then says, well, show us all your exclusivities. Okay. I think they're going to be very different sized lists, because I just haven't seen many exclusives that aren't owned by Microsoft in some way through a studio or something like that. Sony, on the other hand, these are not usually Sony studios that are exclusives. These are external companies that they're preventing from, for instance, The Last of Us. Why isn't The Last of Us? They're coming out with all these new...
It's on PC, isn't it?
Didn't
they bring out a couple games on Steam?
I don't remember if that one actually is. But they're coming out with a new remaster of the original. They have it on... Okay, so there's no reason that they couldn't put it on Xbox. But you know what? It's exclusive to...
it's not
on Xbox.
Comes in March.
Okay. So is that going to be on Xbox?
Probably not.
So Last of Us Part 1.
This is all they have.
Let's see.
Yeah, all they have is Last of Us Part 1 on Steam. There's no way it's coming to Xbox.
And I don't see anything about it coming on
and that's on
Xbox.
That's a Naughty Dog game. Naughty Dog is not a Sony studio.
Yeah.
I mean, Naughty Dog's made games for 30 years.
What reason would they have to not open up their market and sell more copies? Because imagine how many copies of The Last of Us, the original Last of Us, they would sell on an Xbox. Even people who have already purchased and own the original one that this is just being a remaster of, they would purchase it again in an instant on an Xbox.
Well,
there's
and
no excuse. It's got to be an exclusivity deal.
You've got another story in here, and I'm going to jump around a little bit on it that kind of that just doesn't really feed into Sony's argument at all. It's over at the Video Game Chronicle. The Xbox has sold about 19 million copies, 18 and a half to be exact, to PlayStation 5's 30 million copies. So you're talking about, depending on how accurate these estimates
are. You mean consoles?
Consoles, yeah.
I guess.
So, anywhere between you could call it probably anywhere between a 10 and maybe a $15 million, depending on how accurate these estimates are. A 10 and $15 million difference. We're not talking about dollar amounts. Like, we're not 15 million more dollars, 15 million more units of these consoles being sold. So this completely goes in the face of Microsoft is this behemoth that's just destroying the entire industry and owns it all. Sony's got freaking 12 million more copies out in the wild than Microsoft does.
So Sony, the little guy, Microsoft's gonna stamp us out. Oh no, it's so anti-competitive. They're so mean. But then you look at the numbers, you look at the behavior. Everything that Sony does is trying to be anti-competitive against Microsoft. They're trying to be competitive, but it's beyond the point. They're selling, double the amount of consoles. They have crazy amounts of exclusivity deals.
Let me say this: if we ran back the clocks to 2010, 2011, before streaming, when the big deal was exclusivities, and Microsoft had it. I mean, they ate the PlayStation 3's lunch in terms of exclusivity. Yes, you had God of War and a couple of other things, but it was Microsoft's game at that point with the Xbox 360 and the PS3. We'd be having a very different conversation right now if it was that was the landscape, but it's just not. That's not the same Microsoft the only reason, that we're dealing with.
Because that's when I got my PlayStation, from what I remember, and the only reason I went with PlayStation is because I wanted to play Red Dead Redemption I wanted to play it, and the original one was only on there, right?
No.
And then wasn't the original Red Dead Redemption?
No, it was
I don't remember that being available on Xbox.
It was on Xbox 360.
That's one of the reasons. Because I was playing on the streaming service. Maybe I just couldn't get the original one on an Xbox. And then I wanted to play The Last of Us. Yeah, and The Last of Us. I got it to play The Last of Us.
You got a PS4, though. I'm talking about the PS3, the generation before that.
Yeah, I'm talking about the PS4. Like, that's originally why I purchased it, was for those two exclusives.
Yeah, that was
so it does kind of work out for them.
That would have been 2015 that you would have done that. I think that those consoles came out in late 2013, so either 2014 or 2015. Yeah. But if you go back to the two, and at this point, 2 generations ago, that was the heat of the console wars. That was the David and Goliath battle of who's got the better exclusive. Where now it just doesn't really exist. And by the way, we haven't even discussed this. We talked about it a couple of weeks ago. Sony Entertainment. Like, are we just going to completely ignore the fact that Sony owns one of the largest motion picture studios in the world? And they have, in their Last of Us television show that's on HBO is incredibly popular?
Yep. One of the most popular games, games to film or TV, other than, what's the other one with Geralt that's been on there? The Witcher. The Witcher series was pretty popular, but when they got rid of that main actor, I don't know if it's going to come back and be nearly as popular with a totally different lead actor. I think a lot of people are pretty frustrated with that. But I really think that with this, they're telling the main story. There's going to be a point where they run out. Like, they're going to go through The Last of Us 2, and they'll have that whole story. Is that going to then lead into a Last of Us 3? Are they making a Last of Us 3 right now? It's going to be released, and then also going to be a Last of Us season 3, or I don't know how they're doing. I don't know how they're coordinating, the original game, when that's going to end in the television series, and then they're going to start on the second game through the television series. Yeah. But I would have a feeling that what they're going to do is have a third Last of Us that they're going to turn around and continue the film, the show, with that being the story they're telling. I don't think they're going to keep up. It's going to kind of be like the
Game of Thrones.
Game of Thrones, where the books are behind. Like they hit the end, and it's like, okay, well, we need more content, and then they just have writers starting to take the place of the original writer.
I love this story, and I know this makes Kotaku cope and seethe, Brian. It reads as follows. Activision Blizzard is forcing workers back to the office as the majority of the employees at ABK have no interest in returning to the office, either full or part-time. So here's the reality. The company doesn't give a shit what you want, but that you have no interest. They are employing you. Yeah. They're going to tell you if you need to show up to work or not. This is not a you get to decide. While the worst of the pandemic is clearly over, well, not if you're Djokovic, the tennis player that can't freaking compete in the United States. So while the worst of the pandemic is clearly over, I'm sorry, a few years after of getting people to work from home has shown that a lot of folks are happier and even work better if they do it where they live. So decisions to, quote, force employees back into the office are understandably going to be met with resistance across the workforce, and the video games are no exception. Activision Blizzard has confirmed with the news outlet Game Developer that their own plan, which was first made available, will be asking Activision publishing employees to come back to the office on April 10th, while Blizzard workers will do so in late July. So these folks will have until July. That will be 3.5 years after the start of COVID-19 to get back in the office. So they go on, and they have to admit that, hey, there's really no health implications here at all now, right? That's just kind of a bullshit point. Nobody is actively arguing that. Their whole thing, though, is that 3 years of remote work has shown that workers can do their jobs fine, blah, 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 blah. They don't need to commute. That's totally fine. But the reality is these companies want their employees in the office. And whether you agree with that or not, go find a company that lets you work remote. There was plenty of remote game developers before this. I would argue that game development was one of the few industries where there was a lot of remote employees. Why? Because there was so many indie studios with people all across the freaking world. Look at Miscreated. They never had an office because the guys lived all over the freaking place. One guy lived down here near me in South Carolina. They had guys over in Europe. So, but a company has brick and mortar space, has commercial property. They want their employees in the office. Deal with it. I mean, deal with it. I don't know what to say.
You want to know who's mad about this?
The unions?
One of our favorite groups, the Communication Workers of America, CWA.
Oh, fantastic!
I know you missed hearing about these wonderful fellows.
What do they have?
They
to
have
say?
filed charges. They had filed charges against Activision because of them firing 2 of their QA testers. I mean, those QA testers always come back to bite these companies.
Wow.
And because the CWA says that numerous workers protest the return to the office plan, citing cost of living concerns and the impact it would have on their coworkers who might be forced out of their jobs. So, 2 QA testers expressed their outrage using strong language. In response, management set up disciplinary meetings where both were fired. So now they're suing them for firing them. If I went and cussed out my work, I would expect to be fired
immediately.
This union. Yeah, I mean, I could be friendly with my boss and some of my coworkers, but if I went out there and cussed them out and said, I don't like this company, I'm mad, blah, 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 and used inappropriate language that made us look unprofessional. Yeah.
Well,
so
okay. I'm going to be careful with this one. Here's the reality of this situation, Brian. If you are a skilled employee, you have a little bit more leeway in your job. You might be able to mouth off to your manager. Maybe. Depends on what you do. You might be able to get a little testy with the manager and challenge them. When you're a QA tester and you do nothing but play video games and find bugs, your the amount of control that you hold over a company like Activision Blizzard, Brian, is zero. You hold zero power in that relationship at all. Now, if you're the top game developer for Activision Blizzard and you don't want to go back to the office, you know what? You might be able to negotiate yourself out of that. But not if you're a QA tester. So you show up, you act like a jackass, you cuss out your boss, and they're going to fire you. Get over it.
Yeah.
I don't. In any case, Activision and CEO Bobby Kotick can keep on being disappointed as CWA file charges against them anyway. For far too long, Activision has gotten away with treating its employees, especially QA testers, like disposable workhorses. Well, they are. They're QA testers. That's literally what they are. Go get a degree.
Yeah, and these are some of the lowest paid employees in the company.
Of course.
When it comes to this. One thing that they say is that they feel, let's see, where was it? Because they're mad because they feel, let me give you this is not a quote, but this is, of course, over massively OP.
Yeah.
Giving a version of what this says. That plus the company's documented union-busting efforts and its recent corporate declarations that QA should just quit if you're not happy being treated like low-skilled transient employees suggests that ABK's sudden policing of potty mouths is as pretextual as it appears. Now, that's not a quote because that's not what they said. But, I'm looking for actual quotes. Everything is they're saying things like this. One might point out that Mike Ybarra that treating QA workers as low-skilled transient roles who can be underpaid, overworked, stiffed bonuses, and dismissed on a whim for not wanting to move to Irvine and catch COVID is probably why Blizzard's roster of games has picked up a reputation over the last few years for being bug-ridden messes.
Wait,
that's the quality reporting.
How can you catch COVID in Irvine, California, where the vaccination rate is arguably probably 100%?
Close to 100%.
These people can't even open both of their eyes because they've gotten 17 COVID-19 jabs. They're all drugged out on it all. That's literally. I mean, they're literally still grasping onto the fact that people are going to get COVID and die.
Yeah. I know.
Jesus.
I mean, you're going to make me go back to work where it's like our 7-year-old. We told him, hey, walk straight down the hall. Because, he'd sit there and like bounce off the wall. He would just act like a madman walking down the hall. And I was like, well, just walk straight down the hall. And he's like, you want me to run into the walls? Because there's a turn in our hallway, that goes to the right and then goes straight. And he was just like, you want me to walk into the walls? That's how these guys talk when they're talking about going back to work. You want me to go to work and get COVID?
You want me? I mean, it's like, get over it. I mean, I don't know of any other. I don't know, and I'm not saying get over it to be dismissive. I just don't know of any other way to describe it, Brian. If you are working for somebody, here's the great thing with it. If you don't like, and I know we said this a million times on this show, if you don't like working for Activision Blizzard, then go work for somebody else. If you don't want to deal with a manager or a boss or somebody telling you what to do, which by the way, most people don't want to deal with that. Like nobody likes being told what to do. That's at least unless you're just some NPC shill. But we don't like being told. Like, by the way, the people that don't want to be told to go back to the office, Brian, are the same people that loved being told to wear masks and get a COVID vaccine for 2.5 years. So like, they expect they like that authority, but not this authority. But if you don't like this stuff,
it's like tell me what to do, but don't tell me what to do.
Yeah,
is what they're really wanting.
Go do your own gig. Like, go maybe start your own QA testing firm. Do something seemingly with your life besides just bitching and complaining about everything. My level of sympathy with these folks is just non-existent. I just don't. Yeah. I have no sympathy for them. I don't care what their feelings are. I don't care what they want. I just don't care. These people are these people, these QA groups, this CCA union is holding the video game industry hostage. And and until somebody can show me otherwise, which they can't, that's how I feel about it. They are forcing these companies to do the most. Do you remember that conversation a couple of months ago about the fridges in one of these tech companies that weren't the right temperature for mothers breastfeeding and the unions needed to get involved.
Breast milk,
I'm like, are you shitting me?
But the thing
Like,
is, but there was an area for actual pumping and things that did have fridges that were
they don't
appropriate,
wanna use
but
that.
they didn't want to use those. They wanted to go to the other ones and use the staff fridges for their breast milk. And then if you go to the places where they weren't supposed to be doing the pumping and they didn't have enough plugins to do their pumping and things like that, they provide you a space, but you don't want to use the space, so it's so unfair. Now, here, I want you to hear this because there's some responses, and they bring Trump into this. Part of CWA says part of this is Trump's fault, so I figured you might appreciate some of this. The CWA argues that the use of outbursts and strong language in the context of concerted activity by employees was protected by the National Labor Relations Board up until as recently as 2020, before the Trump administration systematically rolled back workers' rights, including modifying the standard for determining whether employees have been lawfully disciplined or discharged after making offensive statements, which ultimately limits free speech for employees. You think they care about that? Activision disagrees. We don't allow employees to use profane or abusive language against each other, a spokesperson for the company, Joseph Kristen Nat, told Kotaku. We're disappointed the CWA advocates this type of behavior. So the CWA is saying it's so unfair.
Hold on. There's something here that is being completely missed. You don't have First Amendment rights with a private organization. The First Amendment exists between you and the federal government. A company can tell, for example, guess what I can't do, Brian? I can't go on my job and use profanity on the air because I will not only lose my job, I will be sued because my radio station that I work for will lose their license that the FCC grants them. You don't have First Amendment protections against a private company. You have First Amendment protections against the government. So once again, the CWA or Kotaku, whatever hack organization wrote this press release, it's just wrong. That's just not even to say that's not even a valid argument is an understatement. It's not even an accurate argument to have. It doesn't exist.
Well, and that's the thing is they're claiming that they're saying that these statements, that led to the firing, the charges, they were made in response to the employee's engagement in protected, concerted, and union activity. So the cursing and acting like that way to your fellow coworkers is a union activity. The CWA is trying to say it's a protected thing, it was a union thing. They also allege that Activision improperly denied a request to have coworkers witness the disciplinary meeting which preceded the termination of their employment. And of course, they're pissed off about how they treat QA testers. It always comes down to these stinking QA testers. For far too long, Activision has gotten away with treating its employees, especially QA testers, like disposable workhorses. Firing 2 employees for joining with their coworkers to express concern around hasty return to office policies is retaliation, point blank, says, of course, the secretary-treasurer for the CWA. When faced with unfair treatment by unscrupulous employers like Activision, workers should have the right to express themselves.
On my my illustrious radio program this morning, I read a statement from the Southern Poverty Law Center, which had one of their attorneys out there,
employees firebombing places, and
getting a domestic terrorist charge. And the Southern Poverty Law Center's response was, "Well, the police are really just ratcheting up the tension here, so that's why this is going on." And I feel like it's the exact same thing. There is no self-awareness in these statements from these organizations. The CWA
didn't they claim to be a legal
secretary,
observer?
Well, that's what they claim there. But the CWA can't even make a statement without having to get into it. And it's in the last line. Scrupulous employers like Activision, just make your freaking statement without the pomp and circumstance. Like, see, this is why nobody takes you seriously, because every single argument that you make is masqueraded with all this fluff and garbage. If you truly believe that Activision is actively working against the union, which, by the way, I'm sure they are, then just make that the point. Unscrupulous and unfair treatment by unscrupulous employees. Workers have the rights to express themselves. No, they don't. Workers do not have the right to say whatever they want at their job. That is literally not the case. Like that's just such a flawed argument. So I'm glad that Activision is, because other companies, Brian, would absolutely fold over on this. They'd fold over just as quickly as somebody like Turtle Boy McConnell. Right? They'd be just the cheapest suit in the world on this stuff. Activision's like, no, screw you guys. We're done dealing with this crap. You can, and this is the problem with it. And you really got me pissed off here.
Sorry.
A company is, I think, inherently a company like Activision. If we flip back the clocks and looked at when this stuff first started, they were a lot more. I remember it. We talked about it. They were a lot more willing and able and wanting to discuss some of these things early on. But as the demands get ratcheted up, as the claims continue to be outlandish, eventually nobody takes you seriously. And that is
when you realize it's not in good faith.
It's not. That's it.
There became a point where you realized it was not in good faith anymore, and it's all about pushing socialism, controlling the company, and just being a strong arm. Then it turns and it's no longer like, why would they work with you? Why would you bother caring at all? And I think it's hit that point to where these companies just view the CWA, the worker alliances, the various worker alliances that go and try to force themselves into the companies through these QA testers, the lowest paid, lowest skilled workers in the company, besides the people cleaning out the trash cans and vacuuming the floor at night, right? Those are the only people that have a lower skill job, and maybe it's questionable whether it's actually lower skill. I would say they're probably honestly, it's probably very similar as far as the things that they're having to do. Go here, do this. Go here, do this. That's the kind of direction that you get as a QA tester.
Well, I'm going to ask that. I mean, these people can't even be good QA testers because they can't follow simple directions. So when a developer goes, hey, check out this level, and you're like, no, I don't want to play that level. I want to play the other level. Like, okay. So you're not even touching it.
Now.
All right. Sorry.
Can we just talk a little bit about some of the things happening with Microsoft before we leave that topic?
Yeah, sure. What you got? Hit us.
So now with the Game Pass, it is now, I think they opened up 40 new countries to the subscriptions.
Oh, wow.
So, you should see a big increase, because this is going to be, consoles, who cares about consoles, right? When you got the Game Pass and all the different ways to be able to play it, whether it's on a PC, maybe this will help with that, especially low-powered device, if they can get it to where they can get the cost of supplies to go down. But Albania, Algeria, Bahrain, Bolivia, Bosnia, Bulgaria, Costa Rica, Croatia, Cyprus, Ecuador, Egypt, El Salvador. There's a huge list. Peru, Serbia. A lot of these countries are getting this Game Pass, where that's something that they can price it at something that's reasonable that they can afford, when games are going for $70, where down there a $70 game might be just ridiculous, right? So I think that this is going to be a big push for them. Also, they opened up that friends and family
what's up with
plan in 6 new countries. I'm still waiting for it to be here, but Chile, Hungary, Israel, New Zealand, South Africa, and Sweden are now going to be able to join that plan. As soon as I'll start letting my kids play Xbox again, maybe once this opens up, because they can't really take advantage of the Game Pass. I have to go to the computer or to the console that they're playing on, log in with my account, and then they can launch the Game Pass. It doesn't make a lot of sense how it's set up. And I think with this, then they'll be able to get all of those various games, have access to them without me having to log in first. So that's going to be pretty cool.
Can I be a friend or family? Or you don't need 5 seats, do you?
You could. That's the thing, is they're not limiting it to that.
It's friends or family. That's literally what it says. Plans enable up to 5 friends and family members to share Game Pass Ultimate.
Yeah, and which is nice that they know, but people are going to use it that way. Just trying to make people feel like they're breaking a rule. Because when they're breaking a rule, then they're more likely to do other things they're not supposed to.
Yeah, Netflix, torrent everything that you want to watch. Stop paying for it and stream it illegally anyway.
And I have an article in here if people want to kind of read it on their own time, but there's one from Peerbox where it says, Microsoft says Xbox Game Pass creates another option for devs to make money. This is something that I mentioned, I think, 3 or 4 shows back. Mm-hmm. I was saying the Game Pass is really good for these new studios that are trying to just get money to keep their employees paid, to keep people on staff, because it's really hard to develop a game and to guarantee that when you release it, it's not going to be a huge flop because there's 10 other games they're competing with in that same, quarter. This is a way that they can put a game out there. People will try it without feeling like they're having to invest. And if you have a decent game, guess what? It'll pick up people. And you have guaranteed money to keep your employees, at least to do the troubleshooting and bug tests, bug fixes and things like that. It works out well. And I see people keep on trashing the Game Pass, but for certain studios, this is what allows them to stay a studio. Or these type of things when it's a release and die a lot of times for most studios that when they're trying to go purely off of sales.
Well, that's exactly what I was going to say. Is you're going to have a bunch of these, and I say weird games, not as a dig, but these weird games that years after they've been released that are on the Game Pass that a YouTuber picks up and is like, "Oh, okay, guys, cool guy 69 here talking about a brand new game." That play it, and it's just going to explode, and everybody's going to have access to it because it's going to be on Game Pass. You're like old Netflix old Netflix things will randomly bubble up, and they'll be on the front page of BuzzFeed or one of these other outlets because all of a sudden it's popular. It's like what's old is new again. So I don't know. I think if you're making the argument that Game Pass isn't good, you're probably not having a legitimate argument. I have heard no actual points to that. Speaking of gaming, Brian, one of the illustrious hosts of this program, Nick Craig, played a video game this week, a new video game that I purchased. I'm very proud. I said last week I would jump into Sons of the Forest, and I didn't have enough time. I didn't have as much time as I'd hoped to play it, but I logged a couple of hours in it, and taking a look at some of the numbers right now, it's hot. You've got just under 65,000 people playing it right now. About in the last 24 hours, about 108,000 people. Let's look at this peak from 9 days ago. 414,000 people playing this thing 9 days ago when it launched. So pretty remarkable there. The game is great. I think I need to restart my game because I spent too much time. I will say this. I'm a pretty independent thinker, but I need help in video games in terms of just tell me what I need to be doing. So when I started the game, and of course I looted all the original stuff. By the way, really cool intro scene. I wandered way deeper into the forest than I should have. And now all these things are attacking me constantly. I'm over here just trying to learn how to build a fire, and like my NPC guy's just getting his ass handed.
You triggered like the higher levels.
Yeah, they're all over me. So I think I'm gonna keep that save and restart another save and do it there. But taking a look at the reviews here on Steam, 82,000 or so reviews thus far in the game. 82% of them, of the 82,171 reviews, are positive. And I had no problems with it. It ran decent on my computer. I've got a 1070, which is not a new video card by any stretch of the imagination. It ran good. I wish there was some voice acting. That I found that there was a little bit of voice acting at the beginning. Some narrations would have been a little bit helpful. Like even the guy just talking to himself in his head, like, oh, what the heck's going on here? Oh, maybe I should do. They could have used that maybe as their guide to get you started. That would have been helpful because it's just atmospheric noises, which is a little weird. But other than that, played fine. The crafting system is still very similar. You've got this. You go into your inventory and all the stuff is just kind of laid out on a tarp. There's this cool little GPS thing that you've got. There does need to be some tutorials because the keybinds are weird. What things you need to have up all the time versus what you don't is a little odd. Some of those creature comforts, again, I can figure that stuff out. I'm not, I'm a seasoned video gamer, but somebody that's, maybe they're new to PC gaming and they see that their friends are playing this and they're not familiar with, for example, inventory's I. Most games, the inventory is not I. So at least the games I play, it's not. That should have been a pop-up like right away. That was the case. Now I think it did come a little bit later on, so maybe a couple of those things, but I'm looking forward to continuing to play it. I'll start a new game and run through it. But really cool opening scene. The story's built immediately from game launch, and there's some point of interest that I haven't gone to yet, but it looks cool. So, Kramit is, and we'll ask you this, Brian. Kramit is over in our YouTube chat, and he says, "Have you guys checked out Dark and Darker? Have you heard of that, Brian?"
No, I haven't yet. It says it's made under UA4, released in August of 22. But yeah, I haven't seen that. I'm looking at it right now.
Oh, it's not out yet.
It's kind of a. No, it was released in 22.
Well, this game is not, unless this is a different Dark
and Darker. Yeah, I see one. Let's see, on Steam. Maybe it's just not on Steam yet.
Oh, okay.
Oh, add to wish list. So it's not available on Steam yet. Huh. Yeah. So no, I haven't. Looks like it's a kind of a medieval
Iron Man. So that sounds
FPS dungeon.
Iron Man. Eh? I thought that name sounded familiar. I guess not. Oh, there's playtests.
Yeah. That was the initial release day. So it looks like it got pushed back. So
gotcha.
I'll check that out. I haven't seen it. One thing I do want to mention is Valheim. Valheim was released on PC. That has been put on the Game Pass. So if people were interested in trying it out, it's had a lot of updates, and kind of from when I originally tried it, it's been polished quite a bit. It's very, very, very popular. But that is available on the Game Pass. I think it was within the last weeks. I think it's been put on the Game Pass, like maybe days. It hasn't been on there very long. Maybe today or something like that. I think they added it. And so this is very recent news, but Valheim is on the Game Pass now. So if you're interested in trying it out, a very good survival game, single player, but, well, it says multiplayer video game.
Valheim is co-op.
They added. Is it co-op now? Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But yeah, so it's co-op. Oh, okay, it's a co-op game. A lot of very positive reviews. People say it's very fun. So if you're interested in trying it, try Valheim on the Game Pass.
All right, Mr. Brian. We are continuing to see some issues in the economy is, I think, the best way to put it.
Things aren't magically fixed yet? What are you talking about?
Yeah, it's not transitory, as we were told for many, many months. EA is laying off hundreds of Apex Legends QA testers, 200 of them.
Probably one of the smartest things they could possibly do for their company.
I'll say this. I didn't realize they had that many QA testers. That's crazy. And these folks were just for Apex. Now, it was an office of EA that was actually based in the United States. It was based in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. And they said that their entire Baton Rouge studio, which essentially is their Apex Legends QA staff, has been completely laid off. Yeah. They say, as part of our ongoing global strategy, which means outsourcing the work, we are expanding the distribution of our Apex Legends testing team and ending testing that has been taking place concentrated in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, impacting service provided by our third-party providers. Our global team, including of remote playtesters across the United States, enables us to increase the hours per week, blah, blah, blah. Here's the thing, though, and I think there might be more to read into this than just things aren't great. Apex is not a new game anymore. Apex does not have the numbers that they previously had. And at a certain point, when you've got a game that is so mature, which I would say that Apex at this point is mature. It's been out for what? 4 or 5 years. It's on seemingly every console. Do you need that big of a QA department at this point, or is the public now just your QA department? Which, by the way, I thought the public was already the QA department. The Apex had some of the worst updates that I've ever seen in a video game update when I was actively playing it. Miserable updates that they put forward. So maybe this is just we don't need QA testers anymore because there's not that many people playing. We're not doing as many updates. Like we're slowing it down. Well, so why do we need these 200 people? I don't know.
Makes you wonder also, is maybe are they starting to use AI for some of the more basic, bug finding and seeing if an update breaks something? Just have AI sit there and play match against each other and find when things crash. I would think that would probably also be, especially for QA testers. I've been saying this ever since these QA testers started going crazy, is AI is going to replace them. Other than maybe trying to test usability with, a little bit of a human perspective. But guess what? AI will eventually be able to tell what a human likes on average, because that's really what you're looking for. You're not looking for that particular QA tester's opinion on whether or not it works. You want your average person who's going to be playing your game. Do they like where this icon is? Do they like this? Do they like that? You can really automate a lot of that and make it to where it's not something that they have to have a full office, of 200 employees sitting there doing these tests anymore. You can have some people overseeing some of the tests, but really AI is going to be doing a majority of the running around and playing and finding the issues. And I think that for all these people, especially for these worker alliances who are putting all of their bets on these QA departments to push all these changes onto these companies, you're taking one of the most disposable units of the whole company and you're betting everything on that. And I think all it's doing is pushing for them to find alternate ways to, or outsource it. Really, I mean, that can be a big risk, but if they find that if they outsource to countries that don't try to constantly push for unions, it's going to save them a lot of headache. And of course, all these people who push for the unions are going to be out of a job.
That's
did the union really help you at that point, right? I just don't think they realize how much they're actually injuring and hurting their own employees, and hurting where if these companies came in what we talked about earlier, good faith, all these unions came in with good faith, they really would have gotten into a better spot and had some bargaining power. But the second that they turned to be bad faith, they lost all that bargaining power. And these companies just say, well, hey, that's one thing Microsoft said early is, hey, one of the things we want to push for first is having AI QA testing. That's one of the things they said the earliest. And I'm sure that they're working on it. They've got Bing, or they've got all these AI things that they're working on right now. They can easily convert that over and have it work with testing this stuff.
So I'm learning a lot reading this Twitter thread from this guy who is a QA tester and apparently has been one for years. By the way, EA is giving these guys 60-day severance, which is remarkable, right? Like in this current economy, I have a relative that was fired from their job a couple of months ago, and this is a job that they worked at for decades, and nothing similar to that. They were making $18 an hour as QA testers in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, which this guy notes is a lot of money. He says where he works now, which is embedded QA. These people are all contractors, but where he's working now, which is he works for a game development studio. He's only making $14 an hour, and that the traditional average in the industry is about 11. So you're talking about people that were paid very handsomely for what they were doing. And I don't know what it is. I think it very well is this, first of all, you realize you're paying $18 an hour for QA testing when you're probably not doing as many updates into a game anymore. That probably hurts. And the reality is we need to cut costs. We see generally an economic slowdown globally. Here is a very quick way. And I know these are people's lives, but this, from a business standpoint, you can either cut off some people or let the whole company fail. I mean, that's literally the option you make. And in this case, getting rid of contract employees that are making $18 an hour is $39,000 a year, something like that, is huge. That's a huge cost savings for a company, which I know is not the sexy thing to say, but that's the reality.
Well, and that's one thing that someone made a comment on one of these articles saying, I think EA sent a warning shot about unionization, which who knows if that has anything to do with it.
I doubt it.
But I mean, but if you're worried about them pushing unionization, they just showed they're expendable. They claiming this is almost all of their whole QA department for that one game that they have. They are expendable, and obviously the game is still working. What are they doing in its place? I'm not 100% sure, but I would think that if these other QA testers were smart, they would start to look at the fact that they're going to be the ones that are cut first, and if they're too much of a problem, they're cut first. They are the lowest paid. I mean, $14 an hour. You can get hired at McDonald's for that. I mean, I'm just being honest.
Costco, I was in Costco today, $23.50 an hour starting salary. for
Yeah.
stalkers. Yeah.
If you pull up to a drive-through, they say starting at $14 an hour. That's how much these QA testers are making. They're making as much as the person who takes your order at McDonald's. That when I say they're about the same as the people that are cleaning up in the evening after work, I'm telling you, it's about the same level of skill requirement. It's not, these people are just, they feel like they have all this power because they got this union thing, but they really don't have that much power, and they just need to realize they're playing with these companies and they're going to lose. In the end, they're going to lose. These people aren't high-skilled employees that are bringing a large value to the company, and they can be replaced very easily with offshore staff.
Yeah, they're bargaining. What they have to bargain with is not very much.
It's not there.
They're bluffing in poker, Brian, with a 7 and a 2 that are off suit. And I mean, you might get lucky and maybe pull a 3 of a kind or something, but it ain't looking too hot for you. So
well, and let's look at the rest of the economy. Ubisoft, they're supposedly closing down several of their European offices, including Ubisoft was at Benelux. And so this is going to be, this is more signs that they are looking ahead, seeing that the economy is probably going to get even worse. Games are going to be the first thing that people aren't buying. When it comes between food and a video game, the people are going to be on 99% of the time, they're going to be choosing food. There is that 1% of people that will choose to buy a video game and not eat that day. But, for the most part, people are going to be letting these games go. That's where the Game Pass is going to thrive even more, because people will set aside that much money for the Game Pass, but $70 for a game, I don't know if I'm going to do that, right?
I'll say
that's what they're thinking.
I'm very fortunate with my job. I have a fun job. I enjoy what I do. I make a decent living. This the Sons of the Forest game was $35, and I mean, with everything going on, I was like, damn, do I really need to spend $35 on a video game? That's the state of what a lot of people
back in the Trump days. Did you think twice spending $35?
No, and
I'm just saying. I'm talking about changes in the mental thinking of people when it comes to small purchases like that. Back in those days, when everybody could get a job, when everybody that wanted a job had a job, right, and they only needed one job at that time. Where now, I think people just are not feeling secure.
Well, that was my point.
There's a lot of people losing their houses.
Well, that was my point. Is fortunately I have $35 in my bank account, so we're good to go. I'm not having to skip out on a meal. But it was the question of, do I want to spend this $35 or do I want to allocate it for something else? And that is
because you're choosing what you're spending it on.
But here's the thing:
before you had excess money.
Yeah, but if I'm having that conversation internally, can you imagine what EA and Ubisoft and some of these other companies are looking at when it's like, Jesus Christ, like we're talking about hundreds of millions of dollars here, potentially shrinking, tomorrow.
Yep.
That's a really, really tough position to be in. And this was after tax, this was like $38, but a $70 game right now, you're not gonna get out of a store. You'll be almost at $90 by the time you pay your sales tax. $90 for a video game? It ain't gonna happen, Jack. To quote our president. Listen here.
Exactly, and that's the thing is,
when I was playing video games back in the 1920s, when I was playing my Atari, video games were like a quarter. I used to go down to the corner store and get in a fight with Corn Pop and get my Atari game, and then get stabbed by a razor blade, then go to a black church and pray, and then go home and play Pong. To quote our president. Sorry.
Now, Square-Enix, they're taking this a little bit differently. They had a weak quarter, just like everyone else is seeing, and they're going to be replacing their president. So
that sucks.
Yeah, so that's what they're going to be doing, is replacing their president, see if that changes things around. He's stepping down. Whether or not this is the cause, this is Square Enix has certain titles they released. They tend to go with these big, titles that you don't, that aren't using season passes. They're not mobile. I think that it's just their business model is a tough one because of the type of games that they release. They're one of the ones being hit pretty hard right now. They closed down one of their studios, the one that made that Forspoken game that got released, because the sales weren't what they expected. But of course, that they released a game thinking, well, we're going to do big sales. Well, people are going for, if they're going to spend money, they're spending it on the hot game, right? Whatever the hot game was. And if you're releasing around the time that a hot game comes out, they're not going to go and buy your game that they've not heard of before. It's a first appearance in its title, and it's not crazy as far as what breaking all these barriers in gaming. It just didn't sell, and so they closed down that studio because as they said, it was a meh for the game, and it just wasn't super popular. So I don't know. I think this is just the beginning. Still, it's been happening. We've been reporting on a lot of these layoffs in the tech sector, and you would think, well, at some point you'd start to see it come back, but it's still going. And there's no signs from our president that he's going to change any of the policies and the thinking that have led us down this path that's bringing us here. But he's still he's going down that same path. He's not admitting any fault. He's not stepping down as president saying, well, maybe it's me. He's going right forward. So I just have a feeling that we're going to continue seeing these types of things. Now, do you want to talk about unions here really quick, and the unions are still pushing, or what do you where do you want to go?
Yeah, we got a couple minutes left, so yeah, that would be very on brand with our episode tonight.
All right, so the New York Times has an article talking about unions in video games, and so if you're interested, this is kind of a little bit longer of a read, but they have some information that might be interesting for some people. Of course, this is going to be a very slanted perspective. But I keep seeing over and over again all of these articles pushing for this 4-day work week, saying that, companies become so much more productive when they do a 4-day work week, when they only work Monday through Thursday. They get more work done, is what I keep hearing. More work done on a 4-day work week. And it's just, ever since I read one of these first articles, now on my news app that, is not my more conservative news app, but the one that's just all news, I keep getting these things saying 4-day work weeks, 4-day work weeks. All the companies that go to 4-day work weeks, they keep them in all of this. And so I think, and then of course, GDC, they did a survey at that conference, and they say 53% of devs support unionization. Well, that's...
What was the number again?
53%.
Of devs. What is the...
These are people that went to GDC.
So it's all indie devs. And only 53% of them support it. Think about it, Brian. Who goes to PAX? Who goes to these events? It is not you have a lot of non-mainstream. There's 2,300 developers that go. Majority of them are indie's not the right word to use. Let me rephrase that. A majority of them are not working for Activision, Blizzard, Microsoft, Sony, or first-party.
They're not major studio devs.
No, they're not. They're mid-tier and lower-tier studios. When only 53% of them say that they're okay for unionization, when that's kind of your base, well, that's going to be that's not a good sign.
Well, and like for instance, the New York Times keeps pushing these unsafe workplaces, and they of course they quote Activision Blizzard, and quote these game testers and everything. They're really pushing for less work. Is really what all I keep seeing. Less work. For me, I'm contracted out to various companies, and so I just have to put in a certain number of hours per week for those companies because we bill them. So me going to a 4-day work week does not help me to become more proficient for my company. It do nothing but harm the amount that I'm able to provide my company. And here they just keep saying, well, it sounds crazy, but it works, as far as what they keep claiming. And I don't see, this is the push by unions. And we saw this. Who was the other one? There was one that was in one of the other worker alliances. That was one of their demands was a 4-day work week. Do you remember that?
Yeah, it was. It was an active. I think it was an Activision subsidiary.
I don't. Yeah, and I don't remember which studio.
Yeah, their demand was like a 7,000%. Yeah, 7,000% raise, a a 4-day work week, and a whole bunch of other stuff. And it was like, okay, so you want to put the company out of business. Like that's what you're at. That's what your goal is.
Now, Business Insider, here's one of the headers, and I want you to hear this, of one of the sections of their article. Fewer work hours may also help the environment and gender inequality. What are you talking about? So it's going to help the environment, yeah, not consuming electricity and producing, because you're anti production, you're anti working for a living. You want socialism is what you really want. And gender, how is this going to change gender inequality? They're saying a 4-day work week also provides vast improvements in well-being, life satisfaction, and sleep for women, since women tend to take on more caring responsibilities. I thought there was no. I didn't think that women.
I thought they were all the same.
I didn't think there was any difference. I didn't realize there was even genetically a difference between a man and a woman.
Wow.
Everything I've been told recently, I finally was coming around, and then here they're just really throwing me a loop for saying that they're different. And so they.
It's sad because Business Insider typically they every once in a while have a pretty good article, but that subsection is bad. So is this other one. No downsides. That you can't make a statement like that.
How is this not biased at all?
Here's the thing. Is there some benefits? Sure. Of course.
Yeah.
Is there some disadvantages?
For the employee?
Sure. But no, I would argue for both. Brian, there's advantages and disadvantages that you can make for both parties in both situations. But to say that this comes back to your point earlier about a disingenuous argument and not in good faith.
Yeah.
When you can say the ongoing push for the work week really has no disadvantages, you can't say that, though. That's not an accurate statement. There is disadvantages inherently. Every decision you make, for me to drink this water right now is a disadvantage. Potentially, the downside could be I could choke on it and die. That's a possibility. Yeah. It's not likely, but I can't say there's no risk of me drinking this. That's just a stupid point to make. Am I likely to take a sip of this water and die here on the podcast? Probably not. But it's just again disingenuous arguments. I don't operate well with those.
Yeah, well, and here's what because they cut out part of that quote. For the title. The companies that took part in the trial, because they had companies do a trial of this, that have reported almost no downsides. None of the 27 companies that filled out a final survey for participants said that they had any plans to return to a 5-day week. So we'll see.
All right. Well, thanks. Thanks for your great insight as always, Business Insider. Thanks for the hard-hitting journalism and reporting. Thank God. All right, Brian.
So there's the status of the current industry, and that's the path they want to go.
And we wonder why there's not a lot of new hot video games coming out, and why they're so focused on everything else. Well, maybe that's why.
All right. Hey, well, you ready to roll on out of here?
Yeah. Mr. Amiga Man, hit us.
Okay. If you want to find me, at Brian Aldridge on Gab, Parler, Getter, Truth Social, or at Boise Computer on Twitter. You can check out my blog, biteoftech.com, or if you go to our website, infectionpodcast.com, make sure on the upper right-hand side you join our server on Discord, where we've got different roles you can join. So maybe you want to play some Ark. We've got 11 Ark servers running. We have a Conan Exile server running. Or if you want to check out some of our politics channel, it'll ask you right when you join. Maybe something you want to discuss on the show, then put a link to it in our news channel. And we have a show news on there that'll be a place that we review before the live show happens. And if it's something that's relevant, we can put it in our show notes and talk about it. If you want to watch the live show, you can do that through Twitch or YouTube. Or if you go to the lower right-hand side, we have all of the audio recordings versions of the podcast. And those are all recorded and uploaded after the fact. And if you are doing one of those, then that means that the show notes happen to be up for that particular episode. And you can click, and there's an audio and video player right inside of those, and all the links that we refer to throughout the live show. So perhaps you're listening and you want to see a video that we displayed, or see some of we have sometimes source material that we reference a little bit. You can go and check out the whole article or all of that. So it makes it very useful for those that are listening. If you want to support us, there's a support option up top, or infectionpodcast.com/support.
Yes, always appreciate the support and everybody checking in. Thanks, Kramit, for checking in this week and putting some comments there in the chat over on YouTube. It is greatly appreciated. All right, Brian, as always, thank you, my man. And let's see, we got we're live next Tuesday, and then the Tuesday after we're on a Wednesday. So we'll be live on the 22nd on that Wednesday. So hopefully you can join us for that. If you want to check out some of my ongoings, if any of this political conversation found you of any interest, check out my day job. It's the Wilmington's Morning News Podcast. You can subscribe to it in all of your podcast apps or check it out at nickcraig.com. As Brian mentioned, if you want to check out the show notes or maybe some of my phenomenal thumbnails for the episodes, you can do all of that over on our website. It's infectionpodcast.com. Thank you so much for joining us, everybody. Have a great week. We'll see you next time.